Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my January wrap-up of my reading and my Black History Month TBR, which I'll be discussing in today's video. Before I go any further, I will tell you that in the upcoming weeks, I probably won't be posting 3 videos a week. I've gone back to work. I'm going to be working as a reading tutor with 6th grade students for the next few months. 2.5 days a week, which is really kind of feels pretty ideal for me. I've been looking for a way to earn some income as a retired person, and this just seemed to be ideal. We'll see. I've never really worked with 6th graders before, but that'll be fun. Anyway, that might affect how many videos I'm able to put out over the next few weeks. It may not, but just to kind of let you know, for those of you interested in, or those of you who might notice if my videos drop off. So real quickly, wrap up of my January reading. Most of these books I think I talked about at some length. One of them I did a specific review on. One I did some readings from. One I talked about twice. So this part should go relatively quickly. The first book I read this year was P.D. James, The Children of Men. This is a dystopian piece of, I guess, of science fiction in which James imagines that people have lost the ability to reproduce, and then I think fairly creatively and ingeniously imagines the impact that might have on human societies and how they would think about the future and the things that would become important to them and unimportant to them. I found there were some, fairly obvious plot holes with this, but I still thought it was an interesting and enjoyable read. I still haven't watched the movie, which many people suggested I should do after I reviewed or talked about the book. Also this month I read The Red Word by Susan Henstra. This is a novel which focuses focuses directly on the issue of rape, and particularly on the issue of rape on college campuses. And while it is set up, I think, to seem like a fairly straightforward, fictional, I guess, discussion of the issue of rape, it is far more complex and nuanced than it might seem at first. I can't say that I thought the book worked entirely, but I will say that it did get me thinking about how our culture dismisses rape, how our culture kind of has a tendency to blame the victim, how far perhaps some groups are willing to go to expose those kinds of things, how complicit organizations like universities are in covering up those things. Just really, I thought, thought-provoking discussion of the issue. Even if I didn't necessarily think the book itself worked all the time, I thought the issues it raised were very well raised. This month I also read 2 books by William Trevor. The first I didn't really like that much. That was The Boarding House. This book centers on a character whose last name is Bird, who inherits a boarding house, and he then kind of, in a somewhat, I think on reflection, somewhat creepy way, decides to create his own society of kind of misfits in the boarding house, and then kind of record information about them and their behavior and how they came to the house and why he chose them. He's a bit playing God with these people and setting them up in lots of ways to fail. It's an unsettling book. I don't think it's particularly successful, in part maybe because there are too many characters and too many situations, but as is true with almost every Trevor book I've read, there are places, passages, ideas I thought were worthwhile. I also read Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle. This was Whitehead's latest book. I did a whole review of that. I'll link to either in the end cards or in the show notes below a link to that review, so I won't go into depth here. I'll just say that I liked the story about Harlem in the 1950s and early 1960s, and I found it to be a really enjoyable read, and I thought the story was engaging. I don't think this is one that's going to win Mr. Whitehead another Pulitzer Prize, but I did think it was a good, solid, enjoyable book, and so I reviewed that. I also read Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward this month. I'd already read Sing Unburied Sing, I think 2 years ago, and I really liked it. I think a lot of people felt like, and with some fairness, it's somewhat derivative of Toni Morrison's Beloved and other works like that, and you can find parallels, I think, with Salvage the Bones as well, but I thought this was a really good, powerful, raw, disturbing, unsettling look at an impoverished family of African American people living in the path of Hurricane Katrina and the life of the sister in that family. I found it to be really emotionally powerful and effective. Just, as content warnings, there is animal violence and then some domestic violence issues as well. But I thought this was really, really good and a really powerful book. I then read my other William Trevor book, which was The Silence in the Garden. I thought this was really kind of a masterpiece by Trevor. Not quite on the level of reading Turgenev or the other books, some of the other books I've read, but just a brilliant example of Trevor using his ability as a writer to tease out information and details in an intricately created plot with beautiful writing and a beautiful description of place and people and culture and society and relationships among those people. Just really brilliant, and for a book that's less than 200 pages long, just I think a really amazing feat. And then the book I finished yesterday was James Kelman's How Late It Was, How Late. I meant to look up when this book won the Booker Prize, but I didn't. I believe it was sometimes in the 90s. And I remember there being some controversy surrounding that because this book contains, I think, the most liberal use of curse words of any book I've ever read, where the F word probably appears in almost every paragraph, as well as other words, including the C word. And in part, it is written, I think that's because it's written in what Kelman believed to be kind of a Scottish vernacular dialect of Glasgow, in the, let's say, 1980s, 1990s. I found this to be pretty intriguing and remarkable, not perfect. I did think there were, some things about it that I didn't like. For instance, I think it goes on a little bit too long. But this is a really, I think, fairly ingenious use of, for lack of a better term, what people refer to as stream of consciousness. We're in the head of a character named Sammy, who is a small-time criminal who may or may not have gotten himself involved in a much larger situation. He is pursued by the police, a victim of police violence. He literally loses his sight. He loses lots of other things that were important to him. And in the end, there's a resolution that provides some satisfaction and some hope. But essentially the book is all either in Sammy's head, where we're privy to what Sammy's thinking, which can be fairly disturbing, and which I think Kelman kind of geniusly allows the story of what may have happened, and we're never not exactly sure what may have happened to Sammy on this weekend where he was taken into custody by the police after, drinking himself into a blackout. Never exactly sure what's happened or what's going on or what the police want from him. But the clues are revealed slowly through Sammy's thinking or through dialogue. The other thing this book really relies on is dialogue. So there's not, a lot of description outside of that, even though it does exist. And I just found it to be really, really kind of remarkable in the way in which the story is told, in the way in which we get to know the main character, Sammy, who really is the only character we get to know, and the way in which we get to kind of feel how his blindness forced him to reckon with himself and creates for him all kinds of difficult situations in a world in which apparently very few people care what happens to him, and he trusts even fewer people than that. Anyway, I enjoyed it, and so I think I could definitely recommend it to people who are interested in reading it, but you kind of have to be ready for the F word and the C word to appear quite frequently, and for that kind of stream of consciousness style. So that's my wrap up. That's the 7 books I read in January. Pretty good reading month for me. I wedged in at least one short book. That probably helped. And then some of my other reading was really kind of compelling. So I said at the beginning that I was doing a TBR for Black History Month. This month, February, is Black History Month in the United States of America. I do think it's important to me, it's important that I acknowledge Black History Month by intentionally reading works by African American authors and works of history and thinking by African American authors to kind of emphasize the importance, I think, in the United States of acknowledging the history of African Americans in the United States. That seems even more important to me this year with American history under attack from right-wing forces who seek to, remove things about American history, which they feel like are going to make white students feel uncomfortable in talking about. And so as they try to expunge African American history, I feel like it's even more important for me to put an emphasis on reading Black history this month. So the problem is that I don't know A, if I'm going to be a BookTube Prize judge, and B, if I am, I don't know what my reading group is going to look like. So rather than, even though I'm calling this a TBR, what it really is a pile of possibilities. And what I have here are essentially 4 books, well 5 books, one of which, some which I know I'm going to read, and others, may shift in and out depending on what goes on with the BookTube Prize. So the first book, and a book I know I'm going to read this month, is On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon Reed. Annette Gordon Reed is a historian. She was the author of the Hemmings of Monticello, about the family that Jefferson, the family that Jefferson created when he raped Sally Hemings repeatedly, and his kids then that were born into slavery. She's the author of that book. This is a book on Juneteenth. It is essentially a series or a set of essays which she wrote kind of reflecting on Juneteenth. She's from Texas like me, and so Juneteenth, which is named that because that's the day in 1865 in which enslaved peoples in Texas were informed that they were in fact free. The last group of enslaved people from the Confederate States to learn that they were free officially. And so for a long time, since I grew up in Texas, as did Annette Gordon Reed, for a long time, Juneteenth seemed to me, or I just thought Juneteenth was a Texas thing, and for a long time it was, and now it's become a national thing. And so I think this will be really interesting. This book won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction this year, I believe, and so I want to read that. I also want to read The Trees by Percival Everett. I've seen this book recommended by a number of people, including Mark Nash. This book essentially revolves around the history of the killing of Emmett Till, who was beaten to death by a group of white men in, I believe, Money, Mississippi. I think that's where it was, in Money, Mississippi, for speaking impudently, apparently, to a white woman. And so the men in those men in Mississippi killed Emmett Till for that, much as Rhett Butler kills an African American man for speaking impudently to a white woman in Gone with the Wind. But this book is really kind of, I think, spooky and interesting, and I think it has kind of a dark sense of humor to it. That's what I can pick up on. I'm really looking forward to getting to read that, and it seems to fit perfectly with the idea of reading African American history during Black History Month. One of the books I have saved intentionally for to read during this month is the 1619 Project. The controversy surrounding the 1619 Project is, a part of this ridiculous, made-up controversy involving, surrounding, looking at American history through a different lens and looking at American history in a different way, which sometimes is called critical race theory, and oftentimes is attributed to the 1619 Project. Lots of people will tell you the 1619 Project was bad history and it's flawed. They're referring to the essay, or one of the opening essays that was written by Annette Gordon Reed, who writes and edits this book. And she made the corrections where she felt like they were necessary. The rest are just objections to the emphasis that she places on certain events. I'm really looking forward to reading this, but it is very small print and it is a pretty long book. So if I don't finish this in February, I will definitely finish this year. And then also the same group of people that I was a part of that read the autobiography of Malcolm X last year, this year has decided to read the nonfiction of James Baldwin. I won't go through all the people in that group, but Cousin from Always Doing more or less put the group together last year and asked if we wanted to read James Baldwin's nonfiction, specifically by getting this kind of collected nonfiction of Baldwin, which I believe Baldwin was involved in collecting himself, called The Price of the Ticket. I'm really looking forward to getting to that. Again, I think it's one of those situations where we are waiting on BookTube Prize groups and things like that to decide how much to read, but we are planning on starting this month. And then the other book, and this is the book which I have to tell you, unfortunately, I'm least confident I will get to, is The Last Thing You Surrendered by Leonard Pitts Jr. I've had this book for 2 years and been intending to read it as a part of Black History Month every year, and I'm ashamed to say I may not get to it this year if you know, my reading slows down and work slows me down, and if booktube prize judging slows me down. But I am putting in the pile of possibilities. I've heard only great things about this book, which involves World War II and African Americans. So I'm really, you know, do want to read this. I hopefully will read this sometime this year if I don't get to it in February. And then it's also possible that I might do a buddy read of a James Baldwin book with Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics. He's put the idea out there, and I've, you know, kind of asked him if we could wait to see what the BookTube prize judging is going to look like before we go on. But, you know, there you go. There, it's my, oh, and also I'm thinking I might read Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. I've been planning on reading that book of her collected essays and some of her nonfiction as well. And that book would be on my Kindle, so I'll put a picture of it over here if I'm going to read that. Those are really my possibilities. I'm definitely going to read the Annette Gordon read. I'm definitely going to read The Trees. I'll definitely read with my group from the James Baldwin nonfiction book. And I will definitely start the 1619 project. And we'll go from there. Anyway, there you go. There's my wrap up for January and my TBR, which is actually a pile of possibilities for Black History Month. Look forward to your comments in the comments section below. Please let me know if you've read these books and what you think about them. And yeah, thanks for watching.